Hey, it's Arlen Schweiger. I'm executive editor of CE Pro Magazine, and here with Chelsea Butler, executive editor of Kitchen and Bath Business Magazine, and Nicholas Boever, editorial director of DesignWell 365. Thanks to everyone for joining the podcast this week. And we're going to talk about this year's Kitchen and Bath Industry Show that just took place, KBIS. Thanks, everyone. Let's start off with some general impressions of KBIS 2022. It took place in Orlando last week after being held as a virtual event last year. Chelsea, overall, you've been to a number of these shows. What did you think about the vibe talking with exhibitors and attendees this year compared to past in-person shows and just being back to an in-person show?
I really got the kind of idea that exhibitors were a little overwhelmed at the sheer number of people who were there. I don't know if they were expecting that many attendees, and they were more than pleased with the turnout for sure. I know it was above 60,000 people who were at the show, and I think they were just, over the moon with it. And I think, all of the attendees being able to be back in person, seeing the products, touching products, giving their colleagues and peers hugs, and, being able to actually sit and watch the stage programming and the educational sessions and things like that. I think that it was necessary for us to be in person, and I think it was much better than anyone could have expected.
Sure, and I think the numbers certainly bore that out. I want to say they announced about 70,000, and I guess we should mention also that the event is co-located with the NAHB Annual Builders Show as a full design and construction week theme down in Orlando. Now, Nicholas, you and I, this was the first time attending this show. So as a first-time attendee to this event, what were some of the impressions you had with going on the show floor for a big trade show like this? And what was the feel that you had?
So I had definitely been to, it was my first time being in this kind of a trade show, I will say. And I was definitely split between going to KBIS and IBS. It was kind of hard to stick in one area, but even that being said, it was definitely a very stimulating experience, I'll say. There was a lot going on. There were a lot of different people running around, and just being able to sit in on some of the demonstrations and talk to a lot of the different sellers and the different I don't even know how to describe them, the designers, the integrators. There were a ton of different people at the show. Being able to talk with them and kind of get a read on just how things were going right now after only reading about it was definitely it was an amazing experience. And I think especially this year, even with it being my first time, there was plenty of stuff that I ran into at KBIS and IBS that were, I guess, like very innovative, very interesting, kind of signaling very, very exciting movements on the horizon, I'll say.
Definitely, and we'll get to that in a moment. And just to add my own impressions as a first-time exhibitor, honestly, I didn't know quite what to expect about the size of the show. So from seeing that, that certainly surpassed my expectations. It was very busy. It was certainly the busiest show that I'd been to back kind of, I don't want to say post-pandemic, but for the tech integration side that we cover on CE Pro, our CEDIA Expo show that we went to in early September last year got a little bit derailed by the Delta variant of COVID. And so that turned out to be a pretty small show. And I know our editor, Jason Knott, had been to Infocom and CES, and I've been to some CESs in the past. And of course, those are enormous. And I would say this was kind of on the par with attending a CES show for me. It was really large, busy, very exciting. I would say that the manufacturers all seemed super enthusiastic to talk to people. And I kind of went back mostly on the KBIS side, but I did go over to IBS for a little bit. And definitely the feeling I got was that people were really happy to be back and talking to the design community, the resellers, the specifiers, things like that. I will add also that, it felt very safe being at the show. To get in, you had to present either a vaccination card or proof of negative test. People People were masked up for the show. So I will say just, the feeling of safety that obviously has been a question these days with certain events like this, it didn't really have an impact. I thought everyone was kind of going with the flow, and to me, it seemed great. So I was very happy to be there. So, Nicholas, as you said, there were a lot of very cool things to see there. The show floor was super busy, lots of interesting exhibitors and innovations. So let's go over some of the trends that we saw. Chelsea, we'll start with you. What were some of the key takeaways that you had visiting with manufacturers this year?
Well, I think hygiene is still a big deal. It started with COVID and it's not going anywhere. So, I mean, even such things as dishwashers, with hygienic options, hands-free. There were so many toilet bidet options, like that has absolutely gone through the roof. I saw something interesting with pot fillers, maybe not so much as centered on the backsplash behind a stove, but off to the side so as not to, mess things up. And then also those to be used for filling up pet water bowls and things like that. That was really cool. Black and gold finishes for hardware and faucets are all the rage. I saw really innovative looking and functioning range hoods. Like those have become just kind of a work of art, and there are a lot more modern contemporary options if that's what you like. I saw a lot of different materials outside of just real wood for cabinets, including laminates, and then also mixing metals in kitchens and baths for sure.
And any booths in particular that stood out to you, or just kind of an amalgam of all those trends?
Yeah, I mean, there were some gigantic
Probably too
booths
many to talk about.
gigantic booths that stuck out, but you want to give everybody some love. But obviously Kohler had a gigantic space that was a lot more open. The GE Monogram booth, obviously that was a booth winner, award winner. That was amazing. But then, and I know we'll talk about this a little bit later when we go through the Discovery District, but there are all sorts of smaller brands, not as well known, that had, maybe not gigantic booth spaces, but just some really great innovative presentations to show.
Sure. I know every time I walk by the Monogram booth, and admittedly, it's one of those companies that's kind of new to me as being on the tech integration side, but it did remind me of some of the large booths at the CD Expo where there was just a long line there all the time to go and see the demonstrations that were going on, which
Well, they
I
had
thought
a lot. They had a
No.
lot of wine events going on there too.
it being having the kitchen aspect to it, I did see a lot of food demonstrations, which were great to see as well. I'm so used to seeing home theater demonstrations, but that was kind of interesting and fun. Speaking of some of the other exhibitors, certainly there was a wellness pavilion there as well. And Nicholas, I imagine being on the DesignWell 365 side of things, that wellness was probably a big trend for you. What were some of the takeaways and things that stood out to you going through the exhibits?
Yeah, so it was actually very interesting kind of going through. I will say that hygiene definitely does stand to still be like big on everybody's minds. But I'm noticing that like in terms of just designing for around that, we have like manufacturers like Moen that are coming up with, really innovative ways for this touchless technology, where it's like they have the whole gesture thing now, where it's like you can control the hot and cold water, turn it off, turn it on, do a whole bunch of different things just with hand motions. But then there's also other companies out there that are really getting into the idea of, okay, well, if it can't be touchless, let's design this as though we know it's going to be touched. And, you have companies like Caesarstone that are doing that with their surfaces, where it's trying to make it so that you have to clean the surfaces as little as possible, low maintenance surfaces possible. Sherwin-Williams, I think they were over on the IBS side. Incredible paint that is designed to basically be antimicrobial and also reduce VOCs in the air. So there's like a lot of crazy innovations going around that. But just in general, you have more accessibility features being introduced into these products. I don't think they necessarily count as ADA compliant, but they're definitely being designed with the idea that they're going to be used for senior generations in mind. Kind of cycling back to Moen, they had that with their interfaces for their smart showers. And then talking about some of the new stuff, like you had mentioned in the wellness pavilion, there was a faucet called Nasani that I think a lot of people had an opportunity to stop by there, that turns the average bathroom faucet into a little fountain that's supposed to make it easier for seniors to, get water to do their daily hygiene routine. And just even over on the IBS side again, there was a company called Swidget that's coming up with these modular plugs and lights that kind of, you plug them in and you can have this video monitor that can, view seniors in a home setting so that they can still live the independent life that they want to live. I think everybody wants to be able to live independently when they hit their old age, but it's there as an extra added sense of security in case something does go wrong. And so there were a lot of features like that. And there was also a lot of growth on wellness features where I'll use Oro as an example, because they're kind of big in the human-centric lighting sphere. For the longest time, they've only had the one product, the Oro One. But recently at IBS, they debuted the Oro S, which is kind of an expansion upon that and kind of entering into that good, better, best category that I know a lot of technology manufacturers kind of like to stay in. So it's really great to see wellness options enter into that category, as opposed to just being, well, this is the wellness option that we have. Now it's getting into the good, better, best in those scenarios.
Right, certainly expanding for sure. And just to echo some of what you guys already talked about and add some of my own perspectives there, I will say, yeah, health and hygiene seem to be all over the place. I was looking at a company like Brondell, which does air purification, water purification, the bidets, of course, that you were mentioning. A company like Toto also doing bidets. They did seem to be everywhere. Nasani, I saw them as well, with the fountain faucets. And one thing I thought was an interesting implementation of technology that they showed a prototype that I guess maybe kind of like Moen was using facial recognition, proximity sensors that can really be used for seniors, for disabled people, that will recognize kind of, what needs to be done or what they're going to do with the water as they're approaching. And also like for pets, like Chelsea mentioned as well. Definitely saw that kind of very cool thing. Sustainability, energy efficiency, I thought those were very important to some companies too. At the Beko booth, they had some really interesting refrigeration and washer products. The company's message of sustainability, they went net zero a couple of years ago. So that was a big thing for them. And I know, Chelsea, we're going to talk a little bit about the editorial advisory board meeting and what some of the people there for KBB were mentioning. And I know a couple of times they mentioned the fridge that Beko had that uses a kind of an RGB lighting cycle to help the produce last longer because it's in the produce container, which I was kind of news to me that you could even do that. But apparently that
yeah, I
was
was going to say, like, we talk about that with people all the time,
right?
With human-centric lighting, but it like blew me away that it's like, oh, I didn't realize that worked on plants too.
Right. And just the more efficient use of resources, companies like LG and GE with their appliances were doing that, their washers and dryers, just really trying to cut down on all the waste that happens in our society. I did see a lot of interesting use of technology, and a lot of it was kind of proprietary for these companies. So a little bit different than some of the tech that I'm used to seeing that might be fully integrated with other things, but just some cool technology that I saw, like a company MTech that was doing 3D printing of metals for these custom door handles, which reminded me a lot of the ways that companies in our industry that make kind of loudspeakers might customize things. So really kind of do that for, designers who have clients that want something completely different, completely personalized. There was a company, I think you mentioned the range hoods, Falmec that I saw that was using this noise reductive system that could really decrease the decibel level of the fans and the range hood so that, people can actually be in the vicinity of one and still have a conversation and be able to, talk at regular levels. Certainly you mentioned Kohler with all of its, digital controls, it's DTV Plus that you can control the water functions, but also ties into lighting, music, different things. Again, also really creating kind of that wellness, escape, spa-like retreat experience. Another way that wellness can be used there. Uh, and also the appliances, again, like LG and GE Profile, where, they have their smart technology platforms that sometimes can kind of link in. I know GE's was using also the Android platform for its microwave and oven product that can really just kind of be used with a bunch of apps, including voice controls, things like that. But they also incorporate AI so they can start learning some usage patterns for cooking and drying clothes and things like that. So I thought that was pretty interesting as well. I did go over to the builder side, like I said, a little bit, and saw some of the things like Nicholas, you had mentioned with, I saw LED downlights that incorporate tunability so that they can work with circadian systems from a company, Savant, and then a company called WallSmart that really makes a lot of very cool kind of flush designs for mounting touch panels, concealment designs for hiding things like wireless access points. So I thought that was stuff that designers can, I think can really appreciate, even though they were on the IBS side. I feel like, the kitchen and bath, the whole design community could really dig into products like that. So I thought that was kind of neat to see.
And I can say, kind of speaking to that, just talking to, because I had an opportunity to talk with WallSmart and some of the other technology guys on the IBS side as well. It did seem that there was a decent bit of cross-pollination going on there, because I was actually talking to WallSmart about that, because they have the really cool parts of their product now where they can do those little recessions into stone and wood. So stuff that you would think that is kind of a lot harder to do that in. They have that process nailed down now, which is really nice.
Right, all sorts of different materials. It was really interesting. And Chelsea, maybe you could tell us a little bit more about some of what the designers and specifiers there were seeing, because I know, annually you have an opportunity to pick the brains of KBB's editorial advisory board at the annual meeting, which I happen to attend as well. But just to give us an idea of, who sits on this board and what were some of the topics and perspectives that were shared at this meeting, because I feel like, it really was kind of maybe a microcosm of what was going on at the show. But I know this was a really important meeting for KBB on your end. What was some of the things that were shared there?
So the KBB Editorial Advisory Board is made up of, all the different roles that make up our readership. So designers, showroom people, contractors, builders, all of that good stuff. They all represent our board, and they're kind of like our eyes and ears of the industry. They help us stay on track with the content that we're providing to our readers and just making sure that we're always providing the best for them. So before COVID, we actually only got together annually at KBIS. And then I say this every once in a blue moon, but I guess one benefit from the pandemic is that we started doing more Zoom calls to kind of get ourselves together at least twice a year. So we were able to do that. So we kept our annual call, and then we added another one on there as well, because this gives us, an hour and a half of time to really go through what the industry is being challenged by at this time. So, we delved into all the supply chain woes and talked to them about like some of their solutions for that, which included, choosing different brands than the ones that are tried and true for them. Offering limited choices to clients, like you have A, B, and C, and these are your choices for your hardware. Mixing and matching appliances and fixtures. They don't all have to come from a package deal. And then they talked about using higher end and international suppliers as well that aren't having some of the same challenges as some of maybe the lower end. We talked a little bit about managing customer expectations because that has always been a challenge for them. And now, of course, it's a little harder. But they had talked about, there not being such a thing as too much communication with their clients, letting them know the timeline upfront, putting things in writing and setting boundaries was a big deal for them. So, it helps to know exactly what you're doing at each stage of the project. And then, when there are going to be delays and things like that, to let your clients know about those as quickly as possible. Try to educate them up front about what's going on. We had equal parts of our editorial advisory board saying that they have clients who do understand this and they're ready for it. But then some people, they know what's going on, but they still are just impatient about the whole thing and think that, they can solve the problem for them. And then we touched on, some of the big trends that we're covering in the magazine this year that touch on wellness, technology and design, and luxury. And for technology and design, I think, Arlen, you're better to speak to that from coming from your industry and everything. But kind of the input we were getting is that obviously it's easier to incorporate technology in a new build versus a renovation. And then clients are really wanting for it to be technology to be functional and useful and not just technology for the sake of technology and being gimmicky and things like that. And then I think that homeowners are wanting to see it as more seamless in the design. I know that you've all heard that. In terms of luxury, that really is just a different definition for anybody that you come in contact with. I think it's more approachable. It's not just price, but how convenient something is, more comfort versus a high price tag. And then, designers are asking clients not to overspend to create a false sense of security. And then finally, wellness, which Nicholas, I know you've been speaking to that as well. Obviously, induction, hands-free, water hygiene, eating healthier was something that they talked about. So, obviously appliances that help you cook, refrigeration that helps food last longer, things like that, that kept coming up in conversation. But they really agree that it's the designer's responsibility to find out what their clients' needs might be and suggest those kinds of products and installations for these projects, because they may not even be aware of how much healthier their spaces can be.
Right. So just to kind of add on to that, and I thought it was a great meeting. For one thing, I will say, sort of observing it, just the amount of similarities I saw between the industries, between the custom home technology industry and the kitchen and bath design industry, I thought was, we're all kind of dealing with the same challenges. So when I was hearing them talk about, managing customer expectations, dealing with supply chain woes, sort of speaking to similar things like that, it made me feel even stronger that we really need to get everyone kind of together on the same page. And they could have, meetings with themselves and they'd be like, you're dealing with a lot of the same things that I am. How do we work with that? And then kind of how can we get ourselves together to give each other more opportunities, I think, because one thing I'll say, looking at a lot of the manufacturers there and seeing the solutions, is that I feel like the clientele is very similar mindset and looking for a lot of the same things. So from my standpoint, I guess I was a little bit surprised to see that some of the designers or some of the people on the editorial advisory board seem very reluctant to want to kind of push technology or integrated technology, at least for their customers. And I want to segue into a discussion of some panels that we editors moderated at the show. And I moderated one it involved home technology integrators, and it was about the kind of possibilities for why designers should hire a home technology expert. What can they do? What's available? What kind of products? And really how to sort of set those expectations. And I thought coming off of the board meeting, it was very interesting. It was very interesting to talk to the integrators on the panel. One was out in the Buffalo area. One was down in Florida, right kind of near where the show is being held. And then one leads an organization that really has a certification process called the Home Technology Association. So it certifies integrators and actually helps people find them, because that was one of the questions was, hey, where do we even find home technology experts? And that's one of the things that the HTA does. So the panelist Josh Christian was able to help about that. So, it was an interesting discussion I thought that we had about, okay, what are some of these products? Because when we look at it from the custom integration side, it's sort of, how do you get everything together on the same page so that at the end of a project, they're going to hand the customers maybe a touch panel that's all programmed and has everything they need on it right there, and is not sort of this mishmash of all different apps, which I still got the feeling that talking to the designers, everything was going to be sort of app-based, and really the smart home was all about, okay, how can I use Alexa to tell me what to do or to figure something out? And really coming from our end of it is, well, actually, no, it's a lot easier to have a pro expert put everything together, have everything tethered in. And I think on that end, there's even more that people don't really know is possible. Whether it's basically you can take from the kitchen, say you want the kitchen as the hub of the household, being, sort of the most trafficked room for many homes, to have a touch panel in there or a device that really can have all sorts of things, from your security, your lighting, your HVAC, your audio, your video, and more these days, shades, everything right at their fingertips. So, we talked a lot about certain products that could be used. And then we talked about, again, how to find integrators. And then from the integrator standpoint, it was, well, how do you connect with designers? So we were talking about, meeting through getting involved in NKBA chapters, things like that. We talked about budgeting. Certainly that was a big question there. So from my standpoint, leading that panel, I thought it was very informative for the designers who were there at the next stage, listening in on it. I hope they found that equally informative. We didn't really have any questions at the end of the session, so I thought maybe that helped, or either that, or maybe they were intimidated to ask something. But either way, I thought they gave them a good sense at why, the term integration, why it's called that, and really what can be possible there. Because I think there's a whole lot of things that are still sort of need to open up the mind to the design community. So going from there, Nicholas, I know you led a panel as well, I believe, that dealt with wellness. What can you tell us about the panel that you moderated?
Yeah, so it was a very interesting panel. It's honestly one of those things that I've kind of I've kind of talked about it myself time and time again, but it's also something that I never get sick of talking about. And it's basically, the panel that we were talking about, it was all about kind of unraveling wellness in the home and figuring out an actual, I guess, getting the information so you can form an actionable attack plan with it, so to speak. And, the people that I had on came from a variety of different backgrounds. We had one designer who primarily works in new home builds. So she's constantly talking to construction workers on these new home builds and trying to incorporate wellness elements at the ground floor. We had another designer who had her own personal practice, was also a part of the product team for Moen. So she kind of had a little bit to talk about in that regard, focusing a little bit on her own practice and talking about, how individual products themselves can factor into wellness, not just entire design schemes. And then kind of going to that entire design scheme idea, we also had another designer who is very heavily focused in wellness as a part of her practice. And it was a very interesting conversation. I think owing to what you were talking about a little bit earlier, the mentality behind adding wellness into the home is definitely growing more into, you kind of want to do it at the ground floor. It can be very difficult at times to add in these sort of like retrofits for, and you can find that in a variety of different ways. The best example I can pretty much give is that, one of the biggest things that we talked about on the panel was allowing natural light to come into the home. And obviously, if you build a house with not a whole lot of windows, it's going to be a lot harder later on down the line to knock out a wall and put in a bigger window. So it's elements like that we were talking about. We were discussing a lot about the idea of how technology has its own role to play in this, where if the design of the building kind of doesn't really fit into the best wellness schema for people, you have technology that can help supplement that. Obviously, as we get more and more, as we get closer to passive housing or just these ultra efficient housing with these really tight building envelopes, one of the biggest problem is, all right, we're not letting any outside air in, but that's a problem because you need to be able to breathe the outside air. So that's where elements like HVAC systems and just air purifiers definitely help with that. And so and a lot of it also just kind of boiled down to really simplifying the concept of wellness in the home. We talked about light, we talked about air, we talked about water a lot. And those are kind of like the three pillars for people to focus on in the home. And coincidentally, those were the three things that I saw the most of at the show, especially with water quality and water management in a lot of cases. And then at the other end of the spectrum, there's also just the personalization element when it comes down to design. I think a lot of people have kind of, when they think wellness, it's very easy to get lost in a lot of the technical details. I mean, for me personally, it's very fun to get lost in a lot of the technical details, but pulling back for everybody who's just getting introduced into it, we talked a lot about it, just the personalization aspect and being able to talk with, designers talking with their clients and figuring out what it is they want, what it is they actually want in the home in order to better figure out how the home can, one, be an expression of their true selves, which is kind of become more important with people spending way more time at home recently. And just being able to have, as Chelsea was saying earlier, just a healthier home. I don't think a lot of people are really aware of the fact that, their home could be better. And one of the designers on our talk actually referenced that, where a lot of times somebody will come to her asking for a singular solution, and then as she digs into the impetus behind that solution, she'll figure out, okay, so this is what the person really wants, and that's how she caters her design around that. And it was a very fun and informative panel, and we had like a lot of different perspectives to come at with it.
Right, and I think that it certainly speaks to the fact that like I said, the similarities between the design community, the custom integration community, they're asking the same questions of their clients, and the interview of the clients is super important because that's what's telling them, okay, this is how I'm going to customize things for you. And on our side, we're talking about not just the smart home these days, it's the smart, healthy home. I think that's kind of just the direction that it's going into, and everything that you said very much validates that. Chelsea, you had mentioned the Discovery District before, so you led a special tour of this during KBIS. What was the focus there, and what were some of those brands like?
So we have done this the last few years, where we've taken a tour of about, I don't know, 6 to 8 booths in the Discovery District, which is an area where there are, kind of not discovered brands. It's kind of in a kind of weird location in the back of the South Hall. Not the easiest place to find, but so we bring attention to these lesser known brands. Some of them are international brands, and so that we can introduce designers to them and vice versa. So we got to see all sorts of innovative products, like a platform to hold your tablets while you're cooking. I mean, who thinks of these things? That was from Highbar. And then there's a microwave hood insert from Microvisor Products. So, you know, just kind of simple, some more simple ideas coming from these places. Lots of heated floor options from Gold Heat and Warmly Yours. And then the showstopper on this tour, and also on my Facebook post after KBIS, was the Lofra. I don't know if it's Nuova Lofra or just Lofra, but it's a international company that had this really kick butt range with all sorts of knobs and things on it, really cool color. And I can't get enough comments on that. They're just like, where is this from? And it was in stock. Like if you ordered it, it would be available, you know, within a super reasonable amount of time. So that was fun. It's always fun every year.
Perfect. So mission accomplished there in terms of drumming up some interest for a lot of these brands. That's awesome
Definitely.
to hear. Now, also as executive editor of KBB, I know you got to interview someone who was recognized as the person of the year in the design community. What can you tell us about that? Who that was, and what were some of the reasons for that deserving honor?
So we've done that for about the last 3 years as well. And this year's winner was designer Cheryl Keyes Clendenin of In Detail Interiors. And, you know, they always come in with a great set of attributes, accreditations and blogs and, social website prowess and all this kind of stuff. But we chose Cheryl this year because she got really involved in the whole Paycheck Protection Program. Say that 3 times fast. She got involved in that and just made it kind of her job to help other small businesses apply for that and get that benefit during all of this. She's a huge advocate of other designers in the industry, just kind of as a rule. It's not a competitive thing for her. Like, she wants to help people out. She wants to foster that. She's great at fostering relationships with all of her employees, all that kind of stuff. Like, she's just definitely learned a lot of helpful career lessons, throughout the years. And she just was, very deserving of it, very selfless designer in our industry.
Very good. Well, I think that's probably a great kind of punctuation mark to talking about KBIS. So I think we'll end it on that note, with that great honor. So with that, Chelsea Butler from KBB, Nicholas Boever from DesignWell 365. Again, I'm Arlen Schweiger from CE Pro Magazine. And with that, I think just a very good insights, hopefully overview from the KBIS show in Orlando. And next year, I believe it's in Las Vegas. So change of venue, and we'll see everyone after that one.
Be sure to subscribe to KBB's YouTube channel and click the like button on our videos. You can also subscribe to the From the Tap podcasts on such apps as Apple, Spotify, Pandora, and Google Podcasts. And please feel free to leave a review.